So, but, let me make this last comment and I'll get off. It's kind of laughable now at this point with this thing being such a catastrophe that the companies now are saying, we need more oversight. You need, 8 months ago, they were saying, get off our backs, let us do what we do best. But this is a great program. Thank you for having it.
Oh, Alan, thank you very much. And, yeah, and that's, that's because every constituency has their interest, and
that's so true. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Okay, I have a question. What do you think about, the courts denied Jefferson Parish request to use the rocks as a barrier? What do you think about that?
Well, I've followed that with curiosity, but I don't have any real knowledge. I've not tried to delve into that. I understand both sides of that. I certainly understand if there's anything we can do to keep the oil from getting into the marshlands, that is the most important thing. It is possible to clean the oil off of beaches. It is next to impossible to get it out of marshlands. We're just going to have to let nature and the disruption we've caused to nature take its course once it gets into the marshlands, which it obviously has, but the more it is in there, the worse we will be. So anything we can do to keep the oil from getting there should be our first priority. On the other hand, if you're dredging sand from one spot and moving it to another, you're weakening the spot where you were dredging it from. And the real concern of many scientists that express concern about these operations is that what we're doing is just weakening up the other barrier islands and make them more likely to be breached during a hurricane. So, we're just moving around protection from spot to spot. But I haven't gotten really into it to, know what I would decide. If it were mine to decide, I would know that I want to get into it a whole lot more than I've been able to.
Well, I know that in the history of the Louisiana marshlands, and if you fly over them, which I've done many times in my career on the cases involving offshore accidents, you go out there over miles and miles of marshland, and you'll see these incredible canals, marsh buggy tracks, all these intrusions that we've made into the marshland that eventually were found out to have devastating consequences by allowing too much salt water in, and we destroyed the ecology that way, and that's why we've got so much of a huge loss of coastline. And so I don't really know what they should or shouldn't be doing, but it seems like with something on this scale that even building barriers maybe it's good in the short term, but with it probably anytime you start interfering with the flow of things like that in a big way, it's going to have consequences that maybe no one can fully anticipate.
Mm-hmm. It could well be. I think there's something to be said for this point of view, that we can spend the money more on other things instead that can happen, that we can put in place quicker to provide temporary barriers. The booms we're putting out there, that's some pretty old technology, and I hope that we got good minds working on what we can do to get some kind of barrier that is lower down into the water. The oil, if it's not treated with dispersants, in most circumstances will be on top of the water where the boom can block it. With these dispersants, we're finding a lot of the oil is in the water, lower down, and is getting underneath the booms. I'm not an engineer or a scientist. I'm a lawyer as well. And I don't know the answer, but I sure hope there are people working on things we can do. And it may be that we can do things that we'll learn from this, and maybe we will find some new ways to get out there and do things. But whatever else you say about, building up berms, they take time to do.
Well, what happens to oil? It was always my understanding that, and I think it's the whole theory behind dispersants, is that if you can get rid of what you see on the surface, it kind of goes underwater, and then some quote-unquote natural process causes it to quote-unquote break down, and it becomes not a problem. Is that really the way it is, or is it something else?
That one I'll have to say I do not know. What I do know is that we don't know, and I think I'm not the only one who should be saying that I don't know. What we're doing with the dispersants, for one thing, is we're adding a whole different set of chemicals to the mix. And what the consequences that we'll have from them, we're not sure about. We will learn over the years now.
Well, do we have a way of measuring in any meaningful way the effect of something like this on life under the water in the Gulf of Mexico?
very poorly, very, very poorly underwater. Now, there are good ocean scientists around the Gulf who can probably come up with some good metrics. But we don't know what has happened right now out there. Again, when I come back from Pensacola Beach and tell you that there are no birds, I suspect that means because the fish have been killed, to the point that the birds have moved elsewhere. But I don't actually know that, and I don't know how you can tell. I did not see fish washed up.
So what does the evidence suggest so far as massive kill-offs of fish and birds from this disaster?
Well, we have counts. The government is running a daily count of what is known, and we have 1,000 birds that have been captured live, and about that many that have been found dead. And we have breakdowns about those that have been visibly oiled and those that have not, and the same thing for sea turtles and dolphins and marine mammals and such. I have to imagine that is just a very, very small fraction. If you have birds that are dying back in the marshlands, we're not going to likely find that for a while. If you have birds that are dying and falling into the Gulf or are oiled on the Gulf and can't lift themselves off the water and fly again, they're going to end up getting into the Gulf and going down to the bottom.
Right. Now they're saying that, you can catch and release the fish in the oil, in the areas that are closed, but you have to release them. So, I mean, where exactly is it that you can go fishing? And I mean, there is, where can't you not go, fishing and crabbing, and you just can't do it now at all?
Well, it varies. The federal government is in charge of fishing closures in the federal waters, and by and large, the federal waters are in the nature of 3 miles beyond the coastline, and that can include barrier islands. And so the federal government is in charge of the middle part of the Gulf, and we have closures in effect from the federal government from Vermilion Bay, well west of the Mississippi Delta, past Panama City in Florida, essentially to the Cape where the north part of Florida bulges down, and then it goes back in what they call the Big Bend of Florida. So a good swath of the northern end of the Gulf, and then it goes in a kind of a rough triangle down to the southeast, with the far southern part of that now is beyond the Florida Keys. So we have a very large part of the Gulf that is closed under federal restrictions. The waters that are inside of that federal line, that 3-mile line, are up to the state in each case. And, I do not know where all the state closures are, but these closures have moved as there has been evidence of the oil spreading around, and as more of the oil has begun to get into that loop current that takes it to the south, the federal closures have extended farther south than the length of the Florida state itself right now.
It is oil. I know that there's some really incredible natural areas on the southern tip of Florida that are very sensitive, like Everglades National Park. And then John Pennekamp State Park, I understand, are the only coral reefs in the continental United States. And I know that coral reefs require absolutely pure water. Are these areas getting any tar balls or anything yet?
They have not yet, but I think the odds are very strong that we will have them on the Florida Keys. And there's a lot of very special spots down there, and that's whether you're into bone fishing along the Florida Keys, which is just a spectacular sport, or snorkeling or diving on the reefs, or seeing the wildlife in the Everglades. It's one of the magical parts of the country. And because the loop current, one of the big driving currents of the Gulf, goes down that way and swoops around the end of Florida, the odds are extremely high that we'll see oil hitting there. Much less of a chance on the southwestern coast of Florida, farther to the north of that spot, just because the current's going to take it farther to the south.